The topic of duplication. And quite ironically, this concept of duplication is the very idea that spurred in me a huge transformation in my life. So if it's okay, I just want to share a quick little story with you guys. I know that some people kind of grew up with this idea of somehow, someday, I'm going to do something great with my life. I've heard that before, and people just found Beachbody, and it seemed like the perfect avenue for them to fulfill this mission that they just felt their entire life, right? For me, that wasn't the case. I grew up very sad, and I grew up feeling like I didn't have anything to offer, and I was in so much pain growing up that I didn't even see my nose. I didn't see how I could possibly ever move past this and feel relief. And it led to me writing suicide letters in 6th grade and feeling like I just didn't want to be here. And I felt that way for years. And it led to me at the peak of my life, when all of my friends are getting their degrees from college. At the age of 21, I was in a mental hospital because I just felt that I had nothing to offer. And I became a mom. I got married after that. And no longer did I think, I don't want to be here. I've got kids now. But it moved to, I just need to endure to the end and just pray that I find relief in the next life. And that's how I lived my life. But when I had my youngest daughter, my little Phoebe, I had just turned 29 the day before she was born. And I remember being in the hospital and looking at her and just asking these questions in my mind of, I wonder what she'll be like. I wonder what she'll do. I just had these big goals for her and just like dreams of I hope that she's gonna be this amazing person and add so much to the world. But this thought entered my mind. I wonder if she's gonna be just like me, where our birthdays are just a day apart. And that thought that my kids were duplicating me, whether I really wanted them to or not, haunted me. And for the first time in my life, I felt a desire to change. And I felt this burning passion and even urgency to make significant changes in my life so that I could be worthy of duplication. That sparked in me this brightness of hope, and it led to coaching. But when I started coaching, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I didn't graduate from college. I have never really had a job other than being a waitress at Denny's. And so I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. But I remember as a new coach listening to a national wake-up call from Melissa McAllister. And I don't even think I've ever actually talked to her one-on-one, but she had a significant impact in my life through that national wake-up call, because I heard her say this statement, that every day she asked herself, if her team did what she did that day, would they move their business forward? And I realized in that moment that it was the same thing. You know, all I know is how to be a mom, but being a coach is the same thing. That I get to work on me, and I get to go through this process of being a leader so that I can be worthy of duplication. And so I present to you these 5 steps that I took to work, you know, not just in my life as a mom and being somebody that I would hopefully one day be proud that my kids are the same as me, but also as a coach working with my team. I loved the session for the elite when John Addison spoke, and he talked about how we get to protect what is in between our ears. And that's what this first step is, going to work on your head and going to work on retraining your mind to think differently and to think about increase in success. And I just know firsthand that I had to retrain my brain to think differently because I'm a bundle of insecurities. And yet, even though I know that there's so many coaches on my team and that I work with don't share the exact same story that I do, everybody's insecure is what I've learned. Like everybody is working through something. And so you first get to work on how you approach things. And then you get to work on leading yourself. So staying in the trenches, figuring out how am I going to hit Success Club. And once I figure it out, then I can teach that to even just one person. And as I'm successful with leading that one person, it will lead to a small group, and I can work with them. And if I'm successful with that, then it works towards leading this movement of people and this vision of everyone who just gets it, and it's bigger than you, and it's bigger than your team. But I want to submit the idea that this isn't like a checklist. Like, you're not just checking off number 1, then you move to number 2, and you never have to go back to number 1 and so forth. Instead, I feel like this is all inclusive. I feel like you constantly have to be doing all 5 things. You constantly get to be working on your head. You constantly get to be saying, how can I be the kind of coach that I want my team to be? How can I work with this individual and be focused on them and a small group of people? And how can I work on like the vision of what I want our team to get and the ideas of what they can get? So it all works together. It's not a matter of, I worked on this 5 years ago and I went to therapy 5 years ago, I'm good. It's all inclusive. But if you do this right, catch up here on my cards, then you will be in that position where you're working with a team and you're working with coaches that you're now sharing with them what has worked for you. Now, this is me maybe being a little bold because I've seen in the wall just ideas and maybe even this mentality in the network of, I was a go-getter, so I don't really need to work with my team because the go-getters are gonna get it regardless. And I just wanna say that I fell into that trap. I was guilty of thinking that myself, and I just wanna tell you it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me to step back. I'm gonna share a little bit more about this later, but last year, I admit that I got very jaded, thinking of all of the people that I had invested time in who had quit, and thinking I could have been spending that time with my family, and I was working on this person, and now they're not even on Shakeology, and I got bitter, and it didn't work for me. I had to go back to focusing on what's in my head and realize that my attitude was bringing a result that wasn't working for me. So we get to work with our coaches and take that effort to share with them the blueprint of the success that we have figured out. If you think of that analogy of building this dream house and all of the effort that you put into to having this blueprint and like the details of where the electrical socket is going to be in your master bedroom, that's the same kind of details that we get to work out as we're working with our coaches, like spelling out the formula. It is totally okay to share with your coaches scripts and even give them post ideas and just spell it out. I like to think of this analogy that I learned in grade school, actually. I will never forget this teacher, and she stood up in the front of the class and she's like, all right, guys, how many of you know how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And we're like, I do. And she's like, okay, I've got the supplies, tell me how. So we just start telling her, okay, take the peanut butter and the jelly and put it on either side of the bread, smash it together, and you've got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So she gets this jar of peanut butter and the jar of jelly and smashes it on this entire loaf of bread that's still in the packaging. And she's like, all right, did I do it? And we were like, no. So in that process, we learned that we had to be really specific and say, take the lid off the jar of peanut butter and break it down to what you would have normally consumed as obvious things, right? It's the same thing in this business. Just because it may be really obvious to you how to talk to people or how to send an invite, or maybe it's really obvious to you and natural on how do you put together a Facebook post. It's not obvious to your team. And don't assume that everybody's just starting off at the same place you are, okay? So that's how your team is gonna know what you duplicate, because you break it down for them. Now, another key thing in this business is we get to learn how to ask like specific questions that can help us to empower ourselves, and then we can work with our coaches and show them how to empower themselves as they're working this business. And this all stems from me thinking about just my own journey, because that's all I know. But I've learned that for me to go from where I was to where I'm at, I had to learn how to ask different questions. And that's what was different here, is learning this art of self-evaluation. Instead of asking myself, what's wrong with me? Why does everything bad always happen to me? I got to start asking myself, what am I doing that is working for me? And actually, I'm surprised how many coaches don't ask themselves that. I'll talk to a coach and I'm like, all right, you're an elite coach, so awesome. Tell me what you're doing in your business. And they're like, I don't know. And I'm thinking that's really unfortunate, because your team is probably clueless on how to duplicate what you're doing because you can't spell it out. This is where we get to really look internally and say, what is it that I'm actually doing that is bringing me success in this business? Self-evaluate those things and put it into that blueprint of how someone else can, very detailed blueprint of how they can duplicate that for themselves. Now, this is a question you ask yourself, but this is also a question that you're asking of your leaders. When you have one-on-one questions and calls with them, or do a Zoom chat and you're asking them it collectively, I know that I used to ask my coaches, okay, tell me your success and tell me your failure, tell me your highs and your lows from the last week. And then I realized, based on the result I was getting of their responses, I realized that this was training them to think about events and label that as success or failure. So they were telling me literally about events and circumstances around their life of, oh, well, I went diamond and that's great, but next week I'm gonna lose it. And I'm thinking, okay, this isn't working, this isn't productive, but if I ask them, what are you doing, what choices are you making that are bringing good results that you want to keep seeing in your life, then that's empowering. Like, that helps them see, like, I'm in control of what I'm experiencing. And if I don't like it, which leads to the second question, what am I doing that's not working for me? If you don't like what you're seeing, identify the choices that you're making so that you can do something different. It's not brain science here. So these are self-evaluations that I'm asking for myself. So if I'm struggling, I'm not hitting Success Club, I'm not recruiting like I want to, this is something I'm asking myself. I remember even last year was a hard year for me. Last year, I was struggling with getting like new diamonds and having like strong coaches join me. And I had to look back and think of, what am I doing differently from the year before? Like, what has changed in my approach? And by asking myself that question, I identified that, I just wasn't investing one-on-one with enough people. So this will save you in your business. It also will save you as you're working with your coaches, so they're not just complaining to you, right? The third question is a question that, for myself, realizing I get to constantly be growing, I get to constantly be learning, but also with my coaches, this is one of my favorite questions to ask them. Tell me what you're learning. What aha moments are you having? And when I ask my coaches that, it gives them an opportunity to be the teacher. And I've heard that you really don't know anything unless you teach it. And that's when you really learn math, is by teaching someone else math. It's the same thing. So this is giving my coaches an opportunity to teach me. Now, as I've been going through this business, and I've been doing this self-evaluation, I figured out a few things that have been working for me, and I just want to share those with you guys. And this is all to help your team to duplicate success. One of the things that I'm doing that is helping me to duplicate success is bridging the gap between the known and the unknown. Now, I'm a mom, I've never worked corporate world, I've never had a sales job, and the majority of my team is the same way. So, for example, when I'm talking with my team, if I talk about like sales techniques and here's how you're gonna close the deal, and I approach it kind of corporate America, it's gonna like go over their head. It's not gonna connect. But for them, if I can say, okay, you've gone to a movie, you have gone to a movie in a movie theater and paid $10 to go see a movie, and you came home and you told all of your friends about it, and you didn't think about, oh, I don't know the layout of the movie theater, and I don't know the actor's name, and oh, they're gonna have to pay $10. And that's a lot of money for this movie theater. So I'm painting this analogy for them so that they can see, like, okay, yeah, I can invite someone to the movies, I can share with them something I love, okay? So it's an example of how I have bridged the gap between the known and the unknown for my team. I focus on being a facilitator and not a fixer through carefully chosen words. So I love Dave Ramsey. I remember listening to a podcast of his, and he shared this analogy of when he's working and someone comes in to report to him, and he's like, that's it, they step into your room and they put this monkey on my desk. And he's like, my number one goal is when they leave that room, that they take the monkey with them. I always think about that when I'm working with my coaches. Now, you know that there's an art in how you say things, and this is where I love the voice memo or just getting on the phone, because I can't say to my coaches, okay, so what are you gonna do about it? You know, that's really horrible, I feel bad for you, what are you gonna do about it? But instead, I can say, okay, so tell me what your plan is. Have you thought of some ideas of ways that you can move past this? But the key words there, and where I stand careful with my words, is I don't say, like, what are we gonna do? Because if I say, like, we, it gives them the illusion that I'm gonna do that for them. And I, again, want them to be empowered. I want them to realize, like, you know, you can do this. You can work through this. You're gonna fix it. But I like to say, how can I support you? So those kind of key differences, I think, allow, so I really don't feel like I get monkeys thrown at me throughout the day. I'm like, take your monkeys with you. Now, another thing that has been key for me, and I constantly think about this, so if you're in the wall, you may have seen, like, sometimes I'll add in little graphics and say, I made this. That's totally just something like, I like doing it, and so I do it, but not because I think that's necessary for success. But I'm clear about that with my team. But I also really hold myself back from things. Surprisingly enough, I have a business mind, and who knew? But I hold myself back from doing, like, elaborate freemiums and special podcasts and really perfected videos, because I want to make sure that when my team looks at me and my coaches and my challengers and my groups look at me, they're thinking, oh my gosh, I could totally do what she's doing. And I could probably do better than her, right? I am grateful for actually that example that I had in my sponsor with Scotty Hawes. I looked at his videos and I, as a brand new coach, thinking, I could totally do what he's doing. Like, just set up the camera. I don't even have to edit off the part where I turn it on. Like, it's awesome. Like, I can be just like Scotty because it's not this elaborate, perfected thing. So I just think this business is a little different than other businesses where we almost have to be careful that we're not too perfect, if that makes sense. Now, identify the real motivation for coaches. Now, this was something that just I was reminded of as I was working with one of my coaches recently, Robin. And Robin had gone diamond, and she was struggling, thinking, I just don't know what my motivation is anymore. I went diamond, now what? I'm not inspired by the thought of 5-star, and it's not fun for me. So we got on the phone, and I asked her, I'm like, so tell me your goals. That wasn't good. I asked her, I'm like, what are your goals? Like, what do you want? And she's like, well, that's where I struggle. I think I should be 5-star, and I think I should go for elite. And she's like, but I don't get excited about that. So talking with her, I'm like, well, who would? Who wakes up every morning and thinks like, I can't wait to be 5-star. Like, it's gonna be so awesome. I'm like, that's not why you joined this business. What is the vision for your life? Not what are your rank goals, like what's the vision for your life? And when I talked about that with her, and as I focus on that with my coaches, a magical thing happens. Like, they duplicate what I'm doing because they are self-driven. And that's like a beautiful place to be at with your team when they're self-driven. But that comes about by you reminding them, like, what's the vision for your life? Like, what is the thing that actually really motivates you? Now, I just wanted to share with you one more story. So kind of have alluded to this, that last year was a hard year for me. And I will say that it started because I was so focused on the wrong things. I loved the talk yesterday from Vito as he shared about the North Star, like this, keeping focus on the thing that really drives you. And I lost sight of that. And I was pushing for the top 10, which I think is a noble goal. But for me, I was not mentally strong enough to stay focused on the North Star and what really mattered with that goal in mind. And I started getting really mad at my team. Because I had these close friends and I'm like, why didn't you hit Success Club? Don't you know that's 2 elite points for me and I could be kept out of the top 10 by 2 elite points? And I just got so mad and just angry about things, and very ashamed of that, and the idea that I got caught up in that. But I started just being jaded and looking at my coaches as, I don't even really know if you're worth my time. Like, as new coaches, it just, horrible thing. And the result was I didn't have coaches ranking advanced. Like, I wasn't having fun. I didn't like the business anymore. And luckily I had this team retreat this last February, and I had a coach who came. And this coach had never hit Success Club. She's never had a single customer. For all intended purposes, you could look at her and say she was a failure. And I'll be honest with you, unfortunately, that's kind of how I had viewed her. And as she was standing and she was sharing what Beachbody had done for her and how she was this completely different person, I was very humbled to realize that success looks different for different people. And just because she wasn't fulfilling my idea of what success looked like in this business didn't mean that something magical wasn't happening. And I had focused so much on the negative thing in people and forgotten about the light in them. See the light in others and treat them as if that is all you see. Luckily, I had a fabulous example of this with my husband. My motivation was to change, but the only way that I had the audacity to even think it was possible is because my husband always treated me as if I was capable of amazing, wonderful things. And I've seen the power that it has in my life when one person believes in you and they treat you as if that's all that they see. I just think we have a unique opportunity in the business that we're in to really work with people and focus on the potential that they have to help even just one person. And if that one person is themselves, then they are a success. I think if we do these things, we can duplicate success in our business, and it'll be fun, and we will love it. Thanks for listening.